odd years ago at a personal level. And I greatly enjoyed his company at the social level, in the golfing circles. And later on, he was to become my mentor in 2002 when he encouraged me to get into politics. And immediately pulled me into his cabinet in 2003. I remember the date, the 3rd of January 2003. And I was to stay in the cabinet alongside him for 10 years. And I watched all these developments that you've articulated as they unfolded, as they were being planned. And I know he was a great gentleman, what you would call a gentleman par excellence, what leadership others would call a global level 5 leader, who is typified by exuding rare greatness, but with a huge sense of humility. And I think that's what he had. Honorable Speaker, after serving as leader of the opposition, he ascended to power at a time of despair and frustration and economic turmoil. And within the first 100 days, he implemented one of the most hailed legacies, especially on the free primary education, which increased the literacy levels to 72%. I'll skip quite a bit of some of the things that I've said in the interest of time. But, Honorable Speaker, I have reviewed a number of documents, including his first speech, and I've learned a number of the things. And allow me to quote, Honorable Speaker, one of the critical paragraphs in his speech at Uhuru Park when he came up to power. And for those who will get a copy of that, that's paragraph 5. And he said, "You've asked me to lead this nation out of the present wilderness and malaise into the promised land. And I shall offer a responsive, transparent, and innovative leadership. And I'm willing to put everything I've got into this job because I regard it as a sacred duty." And we all know he put all his energy into serving Kenya for the 10 years. I've offered our competitors a hand of friendship. We have been through a long and sometimes bitter electioneering campaign. Now the elections are over, that there should be no bitterness. And he lived to that. Let us all unite in forgiveness, reconciliation, and hard work to rebuild Kenya. Nation building requires joint efforts of all Kenyans. Let us work for our common destiny and advance our common aspiration to bequeath a better country to our children. And over the 10 years, he lived to those words. Honorable Speaker, within the same, I think within paragraph 7, he articulated, and I quote, one of the things he said, "We want to bring back the culture of due process, accountability, and transparency in public office. The era is gone forever, and government will no longer be run on the whims of individuals. The era of roadside policy declarations is gone, and my government's decisions will be guided by teamwork and consultation." And he went on to say, which is very important for us here today, that the authority of Parliament and the independence of the judiciary will be restored and enhanced as part of the democratic process and culture that we have undertaken to bring to foster. Honorable Speaker, when we look at the contents of the Constitution 2010 that brought the independence of Parliament, that no president will ever dissolve Parliament at his whims, is part of the promise that was made in Uhuru Park on that afternoon of 2002 in December when he took over. Honorable Speaker, I could go on and on, but we don't have the luxury of that time. But I want to say that the late president had an outstanding approach to leadership that all of us here should emulate to make Kenya a great country that Mzee left. And as we head to the elections, because probably God has called him to the high heavens as a result, as a signal to the Kenyans. And I would like to plead with the electorate as we talk of all the great things the late Mourning Kibaki did. I would like to ask our electorate to honor Mourning Kibaki by looking for his qualities and the characteristics in all those aspirants at all levels. And let's ask ourselves, do you see a Kibaki in your MCA? Do you see a Kibaki or aspects thereof in your member of parliament, in your senator, in your governor? Thank you. Honorable Speaker, I want the electorate to ask themselves whether they see a Kibaki or aspect thereof, those attributes that we are all talking of. And we are saying he did very great, so that we don't just look at, as we say traditionally, that you talk of a cow had milk after it has passed on. We want to look at what do our cows have milk even into the future when they are still living. And I would want to ask to challenge our electorate. Let's look for those qualities in our leaders as we go to those elections. And Kenya shall be a great country as he planned it, as he sowed the seeds, as created the frameworks for, and we all crave so that our children's children will bequeath to them a better country. Honorable Speaker, I really, in the interest of time and all the other members, I want to stop it there. I could go on forever. It touches me personally from our close relationship with him, and I have missed a friend, a mentor, and I believe wherever he is, I would hope that he's looking down upon me and the others that he mentored, and he will help us on our journey through this political thickness. Honorable Speaker, with those words, I beg to move.
Deputy Minority Whip, Honorable Eseli.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity to also eulogize a great person, a great leader of this country in the name of Mourning Kibaki, the retired former president of this country. Mr. Speaker, for us in the western part of Kenya, Kibaki held a special place. Indeed, in the year 2002 election, the western part of Kenya gave Kibaki close to 80% of the vote from Western Kenya. Mr. Speaker, this was not just because of the influence of Michael Wamalwa Kijana, but because the Western Kenya people had great hopes in Kibaki's government. And indeed, Kibaki did not disappoint in his tenure. Mr. Speaker, if I were to narrow down to the constituency that I represented then, Kimilili constituency, we had a special place for Kibaki. Mr. Speaker, at one time, Kibaki visited Bungoma County. That time it was our district, and he came specifically to Naitiri, which was in Kimilili constituency. And we will always remember him, because at that time, he managed to give Kimilili their own district, whereby Kimilili had been anchoring for a new district for a very long time. And at that point, he also laid the foundation stone for a theater, a hospital theater at Naitiri Hospital, being built by Safaricom Foundation. He also laid a foundation stone for a 5,000-liter milk cooler at the same place. So he left a major mark in the wider Kimilili constituency and now in Tongaren constituency. At that point is when he also gave instructions for the road from Kimilili to Misihu to be tarmacked. And indeed, this road was tarmacked. Mr. Speaker, I would say that I was honored to have been in Parliament at the time Kibaki was president of this country. Mr. Speaker, he was an interesting leader in the sense that he listened more than speaking. At one time, when there had been the Tokyo embassy scandal and Honorable Wetangula had stepped aside as the Minister for Foreign Affairs, he had called us for a meeting at Harambee House, members of Parliament from Western, and I told Honorable Wetangula that I'm going to ask the President to reinstate you. And as we got there, Honorable Wetangula grew close, cold feet, and told me, don't mention it. I just kept quiet, but as the meeting went on, at the end I mentioned it. I told His Excellency, the President, Mourning Kibaki, that, Your Excellency, you stopped, Wetangula stepped aside after the Tokyo scandal and the investigations have not come up with anything. Why don't you reinstate him? Because Kenyans are asking, kama wewe unawacha watu yako kwa mataa. And the president laughed and told me, wewe seli, wewe wacha siasa mingi. And we left the president's office at Harambee House. But indeed, within a week, the Honorable Wetangula was reinstated as the Minister for Foreign Affairs. So I've always remembered Mzee Kibaki as a very witty person, but listening to his people. Mr. Speaker, I don't know whether we can actually produce yet another Kibaki for this country. Somebody who had such an impact on the economy of this country until the current leadership that came in after him was able to rebase the economy to a lower middle income economy. Mr. Speaker, this was all because of the efforts that he had put in. And this came about because of the devolution that he started implementing from the time he became president, in the sense that he devolved a lot of economic activity to the grassroots, and that stimulated the grassroots economy. And I believe that's the basis that Kenya has thrived on to be classified as a lower middle income country. And I believe if we follow the new constitution strictly and devolve more funds to the grassroots, perhaps we'll achieve the dream that Kibaki had for this country, including the Vision 2030. Mr. Speaker, it's a great loss to the country, but we thank God that at least he gave us His Excellency Emilio Mwai Kibaki to live that long and lead this country to the direction that he led this country, especially economically, Mr. Speaker. While he might not have played the politics as well as we would have wanted him to, but that was Mwai Kibaki. So we have to accept him as he is and agree that he did a great job.
Honorable Sanko.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to send my heartfelt condolences on my own behalf, on behalf of my family, on behalf of the 6.5 million Kenyans with disability I represent this House, to their family of the late Kibaki, to the people of Othaya, and to the people of Kenya in general. Honorable Speaker, the late Kibaki, our path crossed incidentally when I was student organization of Nairobi University president. And at that time, the Moi regime introduced parallel degree program, a program that I was against. And Kibaki was the official opposition leader, so he was against the Moi regime. Therefore, we had one common enemy. And in the spirit of an enemy of your enemy is your friend, we were friends by default. Honorable Speaker, again, our path crossed incidentally in 2002 when the late Kibaki was sworn in as the third president of Kenya on a wheelchair. Honorable Speaker, therefore, we were both persons with disabilities. And a few months into his leadership, he said, wapi ule mlemavu alifukuzwa university, rudisha yeye na wenzake. That is how some of us who are suspended in the University of Nairobi and other public universities got our amnesty from, Honorable Speaker. So, Honorable Speaker, I remember him as a hero who, without him, I would not have completed my university education. Honorable Speaker, Mzee, as he lie outside here, Honorable Speaker, the man who used a breach of the post-election violence victims' dead bodies to grab half of his government in the arrangement of Nusumkate, Nusumkeka, is screaming the loudest. Mzee, as you fly with the angels, the man who was against your legacy project of Thika Superhighway, describing it as a tribal project, is crying the loudest. Honorable Speaker, the man who coined the 41 against one political genocide mantra because he was against you and your community is shedding crocodile tears. If Malema was a Kenyan, he would have said, Mzee, give us a signal on how to deal with them. Such sellout, betrayers, and pretenders. Honorable Speaker, we mourn the late Kibaki because in his hand, he left a positive economy. He left an economy, Honorable Speaker, that was thriving, that was on a positive climb, Honorable Speaker. But currently, Honorable Speaker, we have 9 trillion GDP and loans of 12 trillion. That is negative, Honorable Speaker. Kibaki, the late Kibaki, left us when everybody had 3 meals a day. Currently in Kenya, it is very difficult to have even 1 meal a day, not because you are suffering from typhoid or lack of appetite, but because the economy is that bad. Honorable Speaker, Honorable Kibaki may have been an economist, and his successor did not study economy. But in any case, he was good in figures, and figures never lie. We were doing well as Kenyans under the leadership of His Excellency Mourning Kibaki and under the first 5-year term of the Jubilee administration. But in the 2nd-year term of Jubilee administration, we are now on a negative trend. May the soul of our hero, His Excellency Mourning Kibaki, rest in peace. Fly with the angel, Your Excellency Mwai Emilio Kibaki. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Member for Alienda, Honorable Tiende Amolo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 6 years ago, one day shy, Her Excellency Lucy Kibaki left us in the month of April. 5 days ago, His Excellency Emilio Mwai Kibaki has left us. Mr. Speaker, perhaps this is the Almighty's way of demonstrating their enduring love for each other, as the Bible says, till death did them part. We all know and accept that the Honorable Mwai Kibaki was not only the longest-serving member of Parliament by the time he died, but also the most experienced. We can debate about many things, but we all accept that having been plucked by Jaramogi Oginga Odinga from the blushed serenity of Makerere to come and serve as the executive officer of KANU, he remained steadfast and remained committed to this country. He was definitely a gentleman of Kenyan politics, gentlemanly to the point of being mistaken for a fence-sitter. But, Mr. Speaker, we all know that behind that gentility was a very careful, calculating, but principled man, a man whose integrity is not easy to question, a man who, when some of his friends brought or sought to bring his integrity to question, he had the courage to release them. This is a man, Mr. Speaker, whose focus was not only on the economy, but also on democratic space, on meritocracy, and later on constitutional reforms. His legacy is superb, a legacy that was nearly blotted in 2007, when some of his handlers led him to a process that he was not fully persuaded of, aided by the judiciary at the time. To his credit, and recognizing that, he accepted the subsequent process of reconciliation, a reconciliation that ended up in a government of national unity. Together with the Right Honorable Prime Minister, they were able to steer this country to a situation of unity that had not been seen before, to exponential growth, and to put the foundations for legislative and constitutional reform. Mr. Speaker, I am proud to have been one of the beneficiaries of the 4 organs of reform, that is the Committee of Experts. Today I wear the insignia of the Elder of the Burning Spear, which His Excellency Mwai Kibaki was able to accord me for my service to the country in writing the Constitution way before the age of 40, based purely on meritocracy. Mr. Speaker, I had the opportunity to serve as the first ombudsman of this republic at the time that Mwai Kibaki was president, and I can confirm that the entire process was purely based on merit. both in the committee of experts and as the ombudsman, there was no single day that the president sought to exert undue pressure, or as the lawyers say, to do our work with let and hindrance. He respected principle, he respected meritocracy, and he allowed independent institutions to do their work. This is a man to be emulated, Mr. Speaker, and there are lessons to be learned. In his humility in deputizing the commander-in-chief, in his humility in restraint of want and greed, and his principle to walk away when he thought there were differences of principle. These are things to be emulated today, Mr. Speaker, by all that are listening and all that are praising Mwai Kibaki. But above all, Mr. Speaker, his commitment to his country before self is unquestionable. Mwai Kibaki, pass our regards to J.M. Kariuki, Tom Mboya, Jomo Kenyatta, Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, John Silver, and the others before us. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Kieni.
Thank you so much, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, on behalf of my family, Honorable Speaker, on behalf of the people of Kieni that I represent, and on behalf of the Nyeri people, Honorable Speaker, I want to convey my very, very sincere condolences to the family, friends, and relatives of the third President of the Republic of Kenya. Honorable Speaker, as the country mourns the third President, we should always remember that he was a father, he was an uncle, he was a grandfather, he was also a great-grandfather to many. So I take this opportunity to convey the message to the family and friends. Honorable Speaker, I had an opportunity to interact with the third President, Honorable Speaker, at a tender age when I was at the university. Honorable Speaker, in the year 1998, Honorable Speaker, when our Member of Parliament, the late Mourning Kibaki, passed on, I decided to vie as a Member of Parliament, Honorable Speaker, in 1998. And I remember, Honorable Speaker, the third President inviting us, because he was the chairman of DP, inviting us for a meeting with all the aspirants who are contesting for the Kieni parliamentary seat. And I remember him asking me, young man, you seem that you are a young man and you are contesting for this seat, but we are beseeching you, because you still have a lot of time and bright future in front, ahead of you. I beseech you, that time calling me Mathenge, that a time will come when you will be elected as a Member of Parliament. So consensus, Honorable Speaker, did not just start the other day. There was consensus, and we agreed that we was to support Dr. Chris Murugaru. And for sure, we supported Dr. Chris Murugaru, who became the MP for Kieni. Honorable Speaker, 15 years later, I was elected as a Member of Parliament for Kieni because I listened to him. Honorable Speaker, I want to say that the leader that we are bidding farewell today has many hearts, has many attributes, has many virtues, Honorable Speaker, and maybe to just highlight a few, one of them being humility. We all remember that when the third President was serving as a Vice President and also as a minister in the KANU government, there are many times when he was humiliated. There were times that he was actually demoted from the Vice Presidency taken to the Ministry of Health. He did not abscond duty. He continued serving the country because he knew in any opportunity that you are given, he used to say, Honorable Speaker, that when you are given an opportunity to serve, you are given an opportunity to serve, not to enrich yourself. Honorable Speaker, the third President detested lazy people. The third President, Honorable Speaker, detested corruption. And Honorable Speaker, if you remember, during his tenure as the third President, when there were allegations of corruption, even with his closest friends, they were actually dropped from the cabinet. Honorable Speaker, that is the kind of leader, Honorable Speaker, that we will forever remember. Honorable Speaker, free education. The free primary education, Honorable Speaker, is something that will remain in our hearts, Honorable Speaker. There are many people, there are many students that I have come across, Honorable Speaker, who said, were it not for his intervention, they would not have gone through the primary education. Honorable Speaker, our farmers will never forget Honorable Mwai Kibaki, because new KCC, when KCC had been taken over by private individuals, when he took over power, he reverted that corporation back to the farmers. And now the farmers are happy about the milk and the prices that they are getting. Honorable Speaker, we from the mountain can never forget what he did in terms of the road infrastructure. Remembering the Thika superhighway, we all know the kind of jam that we used to have, you know, clogging all the way, the entire Thika road. And of course, with the coming up of the Thika superhighway, definitely, even the land, the value of land in our areas also improved. Honorable Speaker, we can say a lot about the former president, but to say the least, Honorable Speaker, is to say that we need to learn from all the virtues that the third president instilled to us. And if we forget all of them, we should just remember that he detested lazy people, he detested people who are involved in corruption, and he encouraged us to work hard. He is the one, Honorable Speaker, who moved from our economy, from down there, Honorable Speaker, to now a thriving economy. Those are the lessons that we need to learn from the third president. May his soul rest in eternal peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on my behalf of my family, on behalf of the great people of Kiminini and Trans Nzoia County at large, Mr. Speaker, bring our message of condolence to the family of the late president, friends, and the entire nation. Mr. Speaker, when you read the Bible, the book of Ecclesiastes, the Bible says there is time for everything. There is time to be born and there is time to die. Indeed, it was too early, Mr. Speaker, for the late President Mourning Kibaki. Mourning Kibaki leaves behind a positive legacy, Mr. Speaker. He was indeed a family man, Mr. Speaker. From his busy schedule of politics, he found time for his family. And this is a big virtue, Mr. Speaker, that other leaders must emulate, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, secondly, when it comes to the matters of the economy, Mr. Speaker, the president took over when the growth of this economy was at 0.06%, and he managed to drive it to almost 10%, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Mourning Kibaki believed in planning. It is said, Mr. Speaker, that failing to plan is planning to fail. Indeed, he's the one who came up with the Vision 2030, Mr. Speaker. The Vision 2030 is the economic blueprint, Mr. Speaker, that all other policies are anchored to. And, Mr. Speaker, in the Vision 2030, the President envisioned Kenya to be a middle-income economy, Mr. Speaker. When it comes to matters of public debt, Mr. Speaker, the President was borrowing wisely. I remember that particular time, Mr. Speaker, when you look at the ratio, the percentage of public borrowing, the GDP, Mr. Speaker, was around 48% to 50%. But currently, as we speak, Mr. Speaker, the borrowing is almost 100%. He was borrowing wisely, Mr. Speaker. The public debt, the burden now is on the Kenyans, Mr. Speaker. We are calling upon the leaders to emulate President Mourning Kibaki. Mr. Speaker, on matters of the taxation, he increased the tax revenue. And, Mr. Speaker, that time KRA had a slogan that kulipa ushuru ni kujitegemea. This is the president, Mr. Speaker. At that time, when it comes to matters of employment, he came up with a strategy of ERS, the economic recovery strategy, and this was about wealth creation and employment. Mr. Speaker, I remember that time we had drastic reforms in the banking industry. At that particular time, Mr. Speaker, the cash reserve ratio was low, and the banks at that time in history, they were hawking loans all over, Mr. Speaker. The banks were giving loans to Kenyans at the low interest rate. Mr. Speaker, because we didn't have a lot of domestic borrowing, he had allowed, Mr. Speaker, the SMEs to borrow from the banks. And at that particular time, we salute him, because that is the time the economy was growing. There was a lot of money with the SMEs, Mr. Speaker. Employment was created, and we salute for him for that. Mr. Speaker, during this time as the president, there was zero tolerance to corruption. And in every government office you went to, there was that, it was written all over, that zero tolerance to corruption. We salute President Mourning Kibaki because he was committed to the fight against corruption. I had an opportunity to go to his house with the late Vice President Omalo Kijana, Mr. Speaker. As a young boy, he went to Muthaiga, and I had a chat and had tea with him. I remember very well even Joseph Kamotho was there. And from the communication, he was a humble man. The very first time I went to State House, Mr. Speaker, I was again with the late Vice President Omalwa after the installation, Mr. Speaker, in Uhuru Park. We went to State House. And at that time, he was still on the wheelchair, Mr. Speaker. And we salute him, the humility he had as a president, Mr. Speaker, the family man, the help when it comes to the economy. So we call upon the leaders of this country, Mr. Speaker, that we are looking for another Kibaki. A Kibaki who will revive the economy, Mr. Speaker. A Kibaki who will reduce the public debt that is burdening Kenyans. A Kibaki who will manage the cost of living. As we speak right now, Mr. Speaker, the cost of living is very high. The issues of inflation are very high, Mr. Speaker. How I wish that we call upon the next president of this country, Mr. Speaker, who I'm very sure is going to be a Kibaki movement, Mr. Speaker, that is going to respect the Kenyans. He respected institutions. He respected Parliament, Mr. Speaker. He respected the judiciary. And we salute him for that, Mr. Speaker. I'm told even at that time he could call off cabinet if a cabinet minister was indeed invited to come to Parliament. We salute him for the respect he had for Parliament and the independency of the judiciary. May his soul rest in eternal peace. I thank you.
Honorable Duale.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on the onset, on my behalf and that of the people of Garissa Township and the people of Northern Kenya, I send my condolences to the family, friends, and the people of Odaya who have lost a great leader. And Mr. Speaker, if you allow me, let me quote from the Quran, verse in the Al-Imran chapter that says, every soul will taste death, and you will only be given your full compensation on the day of resurrection. So he who is drawn away from the fire and admitted to the paradise has attained the desire. And what is in this life, what is the life of this world except enjoyment of dissolution? Mr. Speaker, I had the privilege to serve with President Kibaki in the 10th Parliament, and I want to thank you. You are the only now, you are the party leader of the great party that President Kibaki established many years ago. So you are the only one who is keeping his legacy. The rest are talking, praising Kibaki. When in the 10th Parliament, when presidents were members of Parliament, and President Kibaki was a member of Parliament for Odaya, I had a very rare privilege to serve with him. I had a very rare privilege to be very close to Kibaki when I differed with my party ODM in 2010, and President Kibaki, myself, and many others, including the current deputy president, adopted us as his political sons. And we survived until 2013. Mr. Speaker, Kibaki will be remembered as not a petty leader, as some people are today. Kibaki will be remembered as a person who does not betray. He doesn't believe in the politics of deceit and betrayal as it is today in Kenya. Kibaki believed in the economy, in the hustler, in the smallest of the smallest people. And it was Kibaki who asked the banking sector in our country to open up loans to the smallest of the business in our country. It is Kibaki who brought this country during his tenure. KRA, when he took over, KRA was collecting 600 billion. By 2013, KRA was collecting 1.2 trillion, Mr. Speaker, because he believed in revenue, local revenue. He never believed in debt. Kibaki left us with 1.8 trillion debt. Today, our country is going the route of Sri Lanka, the route of Greece, where we are at 13.5 trillion. Today, when Kibaki was leaving us, a loaf of bread was 20 shilling. Today, Kenyans are buying a loaf of bread for 55 shilling. Kenyans are queuing everywhere. And Mr. Speaker, and I want to urge my Christian brothers and sisters, please, when you want to mourn the dead, don't cheat. Don't cheat. Don't shed crocodile tears. We know those who made Kibaki's life difficult in the 10th Parliament, in the Grand Coalition government. I was a minister. Honorable Charles Kilonzo, Honorable Kimunya are the only two members I can see who were with us in the 10th Parliament. We know how the Grand Coalition, but Mr. Speaker, Kibaki had the best of advisors. Men like Ambassador Mudaura, people like Kimembia, I don't know what happened to him of late. And like today, when you have sycophants, when you have got a cartel that wants to steal from the people, Mr. Speaker, the next leader of the Republic of Kenya must be like Kibaki. And the closest person to Kibaki is none other than Honorable William Samoei Arap Ruto. That is the closest man, because the rest worked with Kibaki. William Ruto will, like Kibaki, I have worked with him, will turn our economy. But please, my brothers Christians, don't praise Kibaki if you know you made his life difficult during his time. May his soul rest in peace.
Member for Ugunja, Honorable Wandai.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. And let me join my colleagues in passing my condolences and those of the people of Ugunja to the family, friends of the late third president, Mourning Kibaki, and indeed the people of Kenya. Mr. Speaker, the more I hear my colleagues speak with passion, the more I'm reminded of the celebrated speech by Mark Antony in Julius Caesar. You know, those of us who are fans of Shakespeare will tell you that the more things change, the more they actually remain the same. Mr. Speaker, let me say two things. That the Honorable President Mourning Kibaki was a man of his own class. And I can for sure remember him for two things, if only two things. One, as you know, Mr. Speaker, he was among the very few of his generation, the generation of post-independence Kenyan leaders, who are known for nothing else but nationalism. Mr. Speaker, Mourning Kibaki lived the spirit of nationalism till he died. Mourning Kibaki was known as a unifying figure. He was known as a person who was non-polarizing, a virtue that we really need in this country, Mr. Speaker. Mourning Kibaki was the kind of a statesman that you would need at any given moment in the life of a country. Mr. Speaker, secondly, is the legacy that Honorable Mourning Kibaki has left behind. You know, Mr. Speaker, many a times leaders struggle to leave a positive legacy. But what I've come to learn is that once you are a good leader, like Mourning Kibaki was, you don't have to struggle to leave a legacy. It just happens naturally. It just flows, as I'm being told by Honorable Wamalwa. Because when you talk about Mourning Kibaki, what comes to mind? The Thika superhighway. It just comes to mind naturally. What comes to mind? Free primary education, Mr. Speaker. And I'm happy the Honorable Uhuru Kenyatta followed in his footsteps. Because again, if you talk about Uhuru Kenyatta, you would obviously think about the Nairobi Expressway and many other things. So we need, and SGR. So we need really, as we send off this great Kenyan statesman, to relook at ourselves, to think of where we are as a country and where we need to go, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I cannot end by saying that Mourning Kibaki did not work alone. Indeed, he was blessed to work with 3 vice presidents during his 10-year tenure. The Honorable late Michael Wamalwa Kijana, the Honorable Mudi Awori, and the Honorable Stephen Kalonzo Musyoka. Those were his able, loyal vice presidents. And indeed, he was lucky to have had loyal vice presidents. Not like these days when you have a deputy president who has become a leader of opposition. So it is very, very interesting, Mr. Speaker, as we send off the Honorable Mourning Kibaki, that we need to reflect upon ourselves as a country. That we need a situation that we find ourselves in currently, where a deputy president has become an opposition leader in his own government. That is something that never happened during Mourning Kibaki's tenure, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, with those very many words, Mr. Speaker, let me say I want to pray to Almighty God to continue blessing this country and to keep the soul of the president, the third president of this country, in eternal peace. Thank you.
Honorable Wangwe.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, on behalf of the great people of Navajo, that of my family and that of my behalf, Honorable Speaker, allow me to eulogize the great man, a man who leaves behind lessons rather than a man whom we can talk about in terms of the past. Honorable Speaker, the man, His Excellency Emilio Mwai Kibaki, leaves behind a lesson on leadership. Leaves behind, Honorable Speaker, that leadership is not just for you, it's for a person, leadership for you as a Kenyan, and leadership, Honorable Speaker, for you as a statesman. Honorable Speaker, Honorable Mwai Kibaki leaves behind a lesson in terms of leadership of economy par excellence. He handled the economy of this country right from the time he came from school and joined KANU. That time, Honorable Speaker, to the time he left as the president, he all preached nothing but economy. Honorable Speaker, the lesson he leaves behind also to us is that he believes in a community, he believes in a person, not just one person himself, but also the entire community. Honorable Speaker, we appreciate the late Honorable Mwai Kibaki for appointing the great man, the Vice President of Kenya, the Honorable Christopher Michael Wamalwa. With him, all Luhya nation rallied behind Honorable Mwai Kibaki. Honorable Speaker, I come from a very small community, the Abanyala in Western Kenya. He is the first president, Honorable Speaker, to appoint a Munyala minister, Dr. Newton Kulundu. We eulogize him as a great friend of ours, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, Honorable Mwai Kibaki leaves behind the 50 years he has been in politics, Honorable Speaker, that leaves us a lesson of patience, Honorable Speaker. Are we supposed to be in a hurry to be presidents tomorrow? The answer is no. Are we in a hurry to be leaders today and tomorrow? The answer is no. Patience pays. Let everyone, Honorable Speaker, remember Mwai Kibaki as a person who traveled a political journey. He was not in a rush to become the president, and he has led this country so well after 2 terms. We leave him with great honor, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, with all those lessons, what do I propose? Honorable Speaker, I propose that the great men on this world are remembered through infrastructure, through the roads, they are remembered through the buildings. And Honorable Speaker, I wish to challenge you, yourself, Honorable Speaker, as the chairperson of Parliamentary Service Commission. That, Honorable Speaker, you are putting up a good building. And it's my prayer, Honorable Speaker, that the great member of Kikuyu can allow me to, Honorable Speaker, through this eulogy, I would wish to request you, as the chairperson, Parliamentary Service Commission. I did say that great men are remembered through infrastructure, such as roads and buildings. Today, Honorable Speaker, we are completing the tallest building ever in this compound, in Parliament. Is it indeed possible, Honorable Speaker, that through you, we can remember this great man of 50 years through this house, that this tallest building behind you can be named Honorable Mwai Kibaki in his memory. Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I submit.
Honorable Kiringo Kubai.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving this opportunity to pass my condolences to the greatly fallen leader. Mr. Speaker, let me take this opportunity to pass my condolences to the family of the late President, Honorable Mwai Kibaki, and also condolences from my own people, people from Mugembe Central, and I eulogize this great leader who has just left us, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the late President Mwai Kibaki was not only a leader, a political leader, but he was also he was a CEO, or he was a manager, in that whatever he was doing, he did it and managed it quite well, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we are not praising Honorable Mwai Kibaki only for his 10 years as a president, but since he started the leadership of this country, when he was a secretary for KANU, when he left Makerere, Mr. Speaker, he came in and started organizing this country from the word go, when we were grappling with the colonial masters until the date he passed on, Mr. Speaker, he has been playing his cards very well, and he has not failed us in any way, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would say that this is the best president this country has ever earned, and I pray we get another one after him, because so far I would say he is the best president we have ever earned. And also, even his people of Wadaya, they elected him for almost 40 years or 80 terms, Mr. Speaker, because he was quite a manager. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable late President was a man of few words, but he was very practical in his doings, and he was really he qualified to the saying of the English saying, which says, actions speak louder than words. Mr. Speaker, the late President rarely talked. The late President was not on the TV or on radio or in the news all the time, but his actions and the planning of this country has propelled this country very far, Mr. Speaker, and that is a leader who needs to be emulated, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I happened to interact with the late President, Mr. Speaker, when he was in DP and he was campaigning for that party, Mr. Speaker, and he happened to visit my constituency when I was just a member of the party, and I had not even joined active politics. And we had an interaction with him, Mr. Speaker, in a certain hotel where we shared a meal and other leaders. And Mr. Speaker, in him I saw a great man. And when he didn't make it to the president, to become the president, Mr. Speaker, it was in the early 90s, Mr. Speaker, it was very unfortunate for this country, Mr. Speaker, because, Mr. Speaker, if the late president became the president immediately after the repeal of the section, the law, so that we can have many parties, Mr. Speaker, he could have taken us very many miles away, Mr. Speaker. Unfortunately, he came to leadership when one factor, he had an accident, and he was also becoming old. But with all those problems, Mr. Speaker, and then there came the problem of the Nusumukata issue, which also stored is a plan for this country, Mr. Speaker. I'll bet all those problems, I'll bet all those handles which were stopping him on his way, Mr. Speaker, he made sure that he had laid proper foundations for this country, Mr. Speaker, especially in the transport sector. He did very well. Education sector, Mr. Speaker. He is the one who reduced the taxes for bondas so that the young people and those who are not employed could be able to buy the pikis or the motorcycle, Mr. Speaker. And as we talk now, that sector is the sector which is employing most of the youths in this country, because there's no any other opening in this country to employ our youths, Mr. Speaker. This great man has done a lot for this country, and I wish him, I wish his family and all those people who were there that they pray for him, and we pray for his soul, and may his soul rest in peace. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Dindi Nyoro.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity. And I rise to send my condolences to the family of President Mourning Kibaki and also to the people of Kenya on my own behalf and the people of Kiharu. Mr. Speaker, we learn a lot from the life of President Mourning Kibaki. First, I want to thank the people of Odaya for entrusting a young person to the position of leadership in terms of their MP, Mr. Speaker. President Mourning Kibaki assumed the role of CEO of KANU at the age of 31, went ahead to become an MP at 32, and served for 50 uninterrupted years as a member of parliament. And it is through that incubation of ascending to a position of leadership early that he was able to refine himself, of course through experience, to become the kind of leader, a towering leader, that he became when he assumed the presidency of Kenya. Mr. Speaker, I remember President Mourning Kibaki for the free primary education, and I remember when he was campaigning, his competitor then actually told the nation that it was impossible to offer free basic education. But President Mourning Kibaki went ahead to prove them wrong when he, of course, gave the people of Kenya an opportunity to go to school without paying. Also, most of us, Mr. Speaker, went to universities and got places in various universities. courtesy of the policies of President Mwai Kibaki for opening up space in our private public universities, Mr. Speaker, which previously were hedged on bed capacity, and also opened up the economy to be able to absorb capital from private sector for establishment of private institutions. But Mr. Speaker, I also want to remember President Kibaki more in regards to the economy. Across all dimensions of the economy, President Mwai Kibaki's legacy, Mr. Speaker, is towering. He got an economy that had revenues of around 200 billion Kenya shillings. By the time he left after 10 years, he had uplifted that revenue by 500% to 1 trillion Kenya shillings. The current regime under President Uhuru Kenyatta has only managed to move that revenue from 1 trillion to around 1.6 trillion, which is hardly 60%. Work that Kibaki did in half a year has taken the current regime an entire 10 years to achieve. President Mwai Kibaki got our country and our economy at a point where the total debt was around 600 billion Kenya shillings. Mr. Speaker, he left us with a debt of 1.8 trillion Kenya shillings, borrowing a net of 1.2 trillion Kenya shillings in a span of 10 years. But Mr. Speaker, contrasting with this regime, that debt from 1.8, we have actually surpassed even the limits we have set in this House. If you add even the guarantees, now the total debt is going towards 12 trillion. Mr. Speaker, also, economically speaking, President Mwai Kibaki left our country when the poverty level was around 39%. Mr. Speaker, as we talk now, Kenyans who face multidimensional poverty are just around 63%. Two-thirds of Kenyans' households, Mr. Speaker, are living in one way or the other in poverty. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, the country that President Kibaki left that was booming has, of course, descended into poverty. On the other sector, Mr. Speaker, which is more visible, President Mwai Kibaki gave a very good environment for our private sector to thrive. Mr. Speaker, most of the banks and most of the companies in the private sector that we are very proud of as Kenyans, and categorically like Equity Bank, like Family Bank, like many other financial institutions around insurance, Mr. Speaker, they got their operating license during President Kibaki's time. All this, Mr. Speaker, he never managed, Mr. Speaker, to ask for any stakes from these companies. And Mr. Speaker, because I see almost my time is up, among the many qualities we can learn from President Mwai Kibaki is that it is important for leaders not to be conflicted when they are leading. President Mwai Kibaki never did business with government when he was president of Kenya. And I want to say, Mr. Speaker, that it is actually criminal for this regime to every time keep on comparing their performance with that of President Mwai Kibaki. It is an insult, Mr. Speaker, to his legacy. There is no comparison. We can only contrast. And lastly, the selflessness. President Mwai Kibaki never named any street on his name. Actually, when people approached him to name Thika Road Superhighway on his name, he...
Member for your...
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for giving me this chance. And on behalf of the people of Emuhaya, on behalf of my own self, on behalf of the teachers of Kenya, and on behalf of the workers of Kenya, let me take this opportunity to send my apt condolences to the family, friends, Kenyans, and even relatives of the late family of Mwai Kibaki. Honorable Mwai Kibaki, the third president of Kenya, was actually an epitome of change in this particular country. He came to power at a time when we had had the long rule of Moi, but he came up with several changes which made the Kenyans to be proud of his rule. Honorable Speaker, this is the president who stopped the roadside declarations and policies which had been the norm of President Moi and which Kenyans were not very happy about. Honorable Speaker, Honorable Kibaki and President Kibaki reduced his motorcade. For those who saw Moi's motorcades, and the time we spent on the roads as teachers and students, when Moi was about to pass, sometimes would spend the whole day, he reduced his motorcade and made it very easy and very ample, very simple for a presidential motorcade to pass on the Kenyan roads. Honorable Speaker, on internal and external borrowing, this was a remarkable president who made the loans to be very cheap, especially for workers and more so for teachers. For the first time, we saw banks, more so some banks which teachers could not go to, like the Barclays Bank and Standard Bank, come to staff rooms and hawk loans to teachers and workers of this country. We can never forget this. He made the loans to be cheap and to be available for the smallest man in the country. Honorable Speaker, President Kibaki went ahead to make sure that the teachers got better pay and worked under better conditions of working. There is remembered for the 17.9 billion which he gave the teachers of Kenya as what was called the harmonized salaries between the civil servants and the teachers of Kenya. And that's changed the life of teachers till today. Honorable Speaker, Honorable Kibaki and President Kibaki worked on the minimum wage for Kenyan workers, and is the one who raised it almost to the level that was wanted by the international standards and the ILO. And to date, it has been improved such that the minimum wage stands at what is required by the ILO. President Kibaki did not interfere with trade unions. It was very easy to negotiate as trade unions with the president and government. And at no time when we negotiated for teacher salaries did we even meet President Kibaki. We met ministers and other officers within the system, and the deal would be done. We would never meet the president himself. He believed in people. He believed in the people he gave office. Honorable Speaker, I cannot forget the fact that President Kibaki did a lot on infrastructure. In Emuhaya, for instance, he's the one who came up with the Stendikisa-Humsalaba Road, which is now in bad condition and which we are asking the current government to make. He also came up with the road from the Buyangu at Rodis Junction to Wekero, which is serving the people of Emuhaya, and we remember him for that. Honorable Speaker, President Kibaki professionalized the civil service and also professionalized the cabinet. For the first time, we heard that people were being told to text their CVs to the president to see where they can be placed in the ministries. This was powerful, and we loved it. There was meritocracy, and merit ruled the day. Today, we see people being appointed not because they are professionals, but because they are good friends of those who are in power. This we cannot hide from President Mwai Kibaki. Honorable Speaker, I must say that this is the president who braved the issue of free primary school, and which has now grown to subsidized secondary school, which we enjoy today. He was very brave because he said within the first 100 days, he will have brought free primary school. I remember when I met President Uhuru after Kibaki left the throne, I told him that Kibaki has done it all. The best you could do now was to do three things: that you must make sure that the secondary school education is free. You must also make sure that teachers are paid well, and make sure that you build the railway. The rest is a story for another day. Honorable Speaker, President Kibaki was the leader of the opposition. Today, people fear to be in the opposition. This, I should say that we go to the next election. Those who will be in the opposition must remain in the opposition, so that we have a check and balance in Parliament. Hey, you guys, what's happening? I must say, Honorable Speaker, that President Kibaki also is remembered for handing over power to his next president.
Can I hear the member for Odhaya? Honorable Vishuki Mugambi. Give the member for Odhaya.
Sawa, asante sana. Asante sana. Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, allow me to pass my condolences to the family, to my great people of Odhaya and Kenyans at large as they mourn this great statesman. Allow me, Mr. Honorable Speaker, to thank people of Odhaya who stood with Mwai Kibaki for that period of 40 years. Allow me to thank Kenyans for giving Rais Honorable Mwai Kibaki a chance to serve them as their president. Honorable Speaker, I want to eulogize a very humble man. A man, if you remember, Honorable Speaker, who came into power and refused to be called Mtukufu. And he's the one who introduced the term Mheshimiwa for president. Honorable Speaker, we need to remember how humble Honorable Mheshimiwa Kibaki was. He refused, as many of you have said, for any project to be named after him. But I want to confess that now that he's gone, we are allowed, as our whip has said, to name a few projects after him. Honorable Speaker, like in Othaya, we have a level 6 hospital, which we will name after him as Mourning Kibaki Teaching and Referral Hospital. Honorable Speaker, I had a chance to serve under Mourning Kibaki as his chairman of Othaya Development Association. As you know then, the Katiba had not allowed the constituency where the president comes to elect a member of parliament. But he gave me a chance to serve on his behalf as an acting member of parliament in Othaya. And I want to say, Honorable Speaker, I was lucky he did recognize my service and gave me an MBS for the service I gave to Othaya people. Honorable Speaker, we cannot forget where the president left this country in terms of economy, in terms of education, in terms of social and political status. We know that he's the man who enacted the 2010 Constitution, which is a document, Honorable Speaker, that will guide the democracy and the freedoms of Kenyans in this country for a long time to come. I remember the president for his vision. Honorable Speaker, Mheshimiwa Kibaki took over a country that was almost directionless. But he was able to come up with Vision 2030, which is a blueprint that again will guide the development of this country for up to the year 2030. Honorable Speaker, we cannot forget the many children who have had a chance to achieve their dreams because of the free primary education. Honorable Speaker, this is something we have to guard as leaders so that all these kids, because all of them have dreams, that they will continue having a chance to achieve their dreams. Honorable Speaker, the late president valued the private sector, and this is an area that helped this country to grow almost with double digits. And if we all remember, the banking sector, the manufacturing sector, they all benefited from his policies of ensuring that he supports the best and he allows merit and competition to thrive in an economy. Honorable Speaker, we have to continue supporting and coming up with policies that are supportive to the private sector. Honorable Speaker, even the tax laws were very friendly during the President Kibaki's time, and we need to continue ensuring that we don't tax businesses out of business, but we have supportive tax policies that will ensure that the private sector continue to create more jobs and to help grow our economy. Honorable Speaker, may the good Lord rest the soul of our great statesman in eternal peace. Amen.
How
long is that? Which is
What's your point of order?
Mr. Speaker, sir, I raise on a point of order, and I've noted that, and I appreciate the fact that you have permitted members to speak for 5 minutes each. However, there are at least over 50 to 60 members who would like to address this issue, and I'm requesting we will not have a chance for all of us to speak. The time is 4:30, and if you do the mathematics and the House adjourns at 7, not everyone will be able to pay tributes to His Excellency
So what are you suggesting?
I'm suggesting that the time be reduced to either 2 or 3 minutes. We did that for the late His Excellency Daniel Toroitich Moi, where we contributed at 2 minutes each.
Can we say 3 minutes? Yeah, you know, honourable members, remember this, that's why you see I'm consulting, because we also need to know at what point should the public be stopped from coming, because we can't adjourn and walk out in our procession against the public. So even these people in red attire there should also organize themselves. Honorable Kilonzo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, allow me to pass my condolences and to those of the larger Kilonzo family. The late Mzee Kibaki was a good friend of my dad when my dad was in the police service. And indeed, when my father died in suspicious circumstances, Mzee Kibaki, then a member of parliament in the opposition, did come to mourn with the family, Mr. Speaker, and attended the funeral service at Holy Family Basilica. Mr. Speaker, myself, even joining politics, Mr. Speaker, among the few people supported me financially was none other than the late President Mwai Kibaki. Mr. Speaker, Kibaki will be remembered as an economist, a man who transformed the Kenyan economy to what it is today, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, changing Kenyan economy to a middle-class economy is not something, Mr. Speaker, which can go unnoticed, and this was done during Kibaki's time. Mr. Speaker, it is during Kibaki's time when he had the Vision 2030, which successive government, Mr. Speaker, have still adopted. I recall very well as a young member of parliament, the first budget, which was read in July 2003, Mr. Speaker, after Kibaki took over from the former regime of Kano, was only 256 billion, the entire budget, Mr. Speaker. 10 years later, Mr. Speaker, the national budget which he handed over, the last budget which he supervised was at 1.8 billion, Mr. Speaker. It was during his time, Mr. Speaker, where he emphasized on generating our own taxes to run the economy and reduced our dependence of aid, especially Western aid, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, many might not know that Mzee Kibaki believed in devolution, Mr. Speaker. It was during his time, Mr. Speaker, that CDF, which was a private member's motion by Engineer Karue, he actually requested Engineer Karue to surrender the bill to be a government bill, Mr. Speaker, and then the government brought the bill. Today, we now have National Government Constituency Development Fund, Mr. Speaker, courtesy of the late President, Mr. Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker, the late President believed that, Mr. Speaker, ministers in the House must fight their wars in the House, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, allow me to end there and say, may his soul rest in peace.
Member for Madira.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to, from the onset, send my condolences to the family of the late Mzee Mwai Kibaki, a great man, a visionary leader, a brilliant economist, a Democrat par excellence, and the best president ever in our 5-decade history in this country. Mr. Speaker, the late Mwai Kibaki hailed from Nyeri, the lads of milk and honey, the land of the courageous, the land of the brave, the land of Dedan Kimathi Washuri, the land of Professor Wangari Maathai, and he has done us proud. Mr. Speaker, Mwai Kibaki's pretended over unprecedented economic development that changed people's lives, and by the time he handed over in 2013, Mr. Speaker, he left Kenyans a happy lot. Everybody had money in the pocket. Mr. Speaker, the late Mzee Mwai Kibaki expanded business and created the best environment for doing business in this country. He opened up the East for the people of Kenya to trade with China and other countries. Mr. Speaker,
he brought about access to affordable credit. If Kenyans can remember, during his time, there were tents outside every building where banks were hawking loans to the people of Kenya to do business. Today, the reverse is the reality. It is Mourning Kibaki who brought free primary education, and he will be remembered by the people of Kenya for many years to come. Mr. Speaker, Mourning Kibaki had respect for the rule of law. He never used the criminal justice system to manage politics. He managed politics in the conventional way. And he was a gentleman, and he never coerced anybody. He never intimidated anybody to follow his political thinking. He let every Kenyan be. After serving for 39 years as member of parliament for Udaya, when the time came for him to retire, he never forced the people of Udaya, who is the next member of parliament. When his time as president to retire came, he allowed the people of Kenya to choose their own leader without coercion and intimidation. May his soul rest in eternal peace.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to mourn my president, His Excellency Mourning Kibaki. Mr. Speaker, I will remember President Mourning Kibaki as the president of this country, Mr. Speaker, and I remember him specifically, Mr. Speaker, because the Jamhuri Day of 2011, Mr. Speaker, the president awarded me the Head of State Commendation Award, the HSC, Mr. Speaker. That is why I use HSC. That is an award, Mr. Speaker, that I received in 2011 from the president, recognizing the work I do in my community, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, sir, on behalf of the great people of Migori County, and on behalf of persons with disabilities that I represent, Mr. Speaker, in this House, I wish to send my condolences to the family and the people of Kenya. Mr. Speaker, persons with disabilities of Kenya are mourning the president, Mr. Speaker, who basically made their lives better in this country. Mr. Speaker, it is during Kibaki's time in 2003, Mr. Speaker, that the Persons with Disabilities Act was signed into law in this country, Mr. Speaker, and that has been a law that has made it easier for persons with disabilities of Kenya, Mr. Speaker, to actually have their lives and their rights recognized in this country. Mr. Speaker, it was during that time, and Mr. Speaker, going into 2008, when actually this country also, Mr. Speaker, as you may know, signed the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, Mr. Speaker, making life easier for persons with disabilities. Mr. Speaker, I am a life member of Maendeleo ya Wanawake. Mr. Speaker, Maendeleo ya Wanawake in this country, women of this country, Mr. Speaker, are proud of President Kibaki, Mr. Speaker, because you know that President Kibaki supported Maendeleo ya Wanawake and supported women of this country, Mr. Speaker. We are mourning the loss of our president. Mr. Speaker, free primary education, Mr. Speaker. Children who would never have gone to school, Mr. Speaker, had an opportunity for the first time to access education, to see the classroom, Mr. Speaker, courtesy of our third president of the Republic of Kenya, His Excellency Mourning Kibaki. Mr. Speaker, for me, the first time I saw a superhighway was during his time, Mr. Speaker, coming to do a superhighway, Thika superhighway infrastructure. Mr. Speaker, we must give credit where it is due. And Mr. Speaker, I salute President Mourning Kibaki, and I ask that his soul rests in eternal peace. Amen. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Kadui. Sorry, honourable members, I'm still trying to coordinate out there.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I wish, on behalf of my family, the people of Kandui, and the entire Democratic Action Party, to send condolences to the family, friends, relatives, and Kenyans for the loss of President Emilio Mourning Kibaki. Mr. Speaker, I had the privilege of serving with President Kibaki during the 8th Parliament when he was my leader of opposition between 1997 and 2002. Mr. Speaker, I also had the privilege of having served with him as my president, as both member of parliament
and also as his special envoy to the African Union and Somalia, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this is a great man, a great leader Kenyans have lost. He was a pillar of stability, Mr. Speaker. We all are aware of the things he has done for this country, ranging from free primary education, growing our economy, Mr. Speaker, building stable infrastructure, ensuring and liberal and open society with expanded democratic space. Mr. Speaker, as you are aware, he was the leader of the Democratic Party of Kenya, the party you now lead. The party that you now lead, Mr. Speaker, and I lead the Democratic Action Party of Kenya. Both our parties, Mr. Speaker, stand for expanded democracy, expanded democratic space in this country, Mr. Speaker. They can see the Honorable Chungwa laughing at it. It is true we stand for that, Mr. Speaker. And today, as we mourn the late fallen hero, I want to appeal that we emulate the things he did for this country. We emulate the things he did for this country, growing this country, ensuring equitable distribution of resources. He visited Bungoma, my constituency, and started Kibabi Teacher Diploma Training College. People had been praying for it for many years. Eventually, he started Kibabi University, and he did many people for which he's going to be remembered, Mr. Speaker. May his soul rest in everlasting peace. Amen.
Sorry. I'm still trying to negotiate to see whether I can get you more. Member for Nyandarua.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. On behalf of myself and on behalf of the great people of Nyandarua, I join all Kenyans in expressing my sorrow and heartfelt condolences to the family of our late former President Emilio Mwai Kibaki. We are praying to God that he may give them comfort and strength at this moment of great pain. Our country is indeed mourning the loss of a great Kenyan who served as a transformative leader for many decades. While we mourn our former president, we must remember to be grateful for his long life. We must also be grateful for his long stint in public service. Since the early days of independent Kenya, he served as a minister, vice president, opposition leader, and finally as president. His long story carries a significant lesson for us. He leaves with us a legacy of service, indeed a great man. The late Mwai Kibaki taught us that leadership is an opportunity to serve others and not to simply satisfy greed and fulfill selfish desires. Mwai Kibaki served the people of Kenya in various capacities for an extended period. His example reminds us of the need for endurance, persistence, fortitude, and humility. Let all Kenyans carry this with them, the memory of a man who served his people and continually sought to improve lives. May God bless Kenya, and may his legacy of the late Mwai Kibaki always shine brightly in our nation. May his soul rest in eternal peace.
Member for Narok North.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I'd also like to take this opportunity to condole with the family of the late Honorable Mwai Kibaki and to tell them that the Kenyan people are with them at this particular time. Honorable Speaker, this is actually what we can call the end of an era. This one is actually the last of the founding fathers that has left us, and the history will always judge him kindly because he has been the best of the best as far as the affairs of these countries are concerned. Honorable Speaker, I'd like maybe to just say that, as they say, calm waters run deep. And I believe there is no deeper leader that has ever served this country more than Mwai Kibaki. In fact, many people will have seen his demeanor, self-effacing manner of living and of doing his work as a weakness, but it was a strength that actually made this country great after it was actually the precipice as far as its economy was concerned. He actually retrieved the economy of this country at the very brink when it was almost about to cross the Rubicon. Honorable Speaker, Honorable Kibaki taught us many things. The most important of them all is that a great leader is born, a great leader remains a great leader, and you do not have to be a gadfly to become a great leader. He became a great leader because he was meant to be, and he was. Honorable Speaker, the other lesson that we as politicians have learned from the life of Mwai Kibaki is that your family does not need to actually ruin the economy through theft, through corruption, or through actually dipping their hands in the till. He left a family that was clean. He left a family that did not have to benefit from the public largesse. And I think this is a family that should have been emulated, and we are very proud of that family. Honorable Speaker, I would like to also say that Honorable Kibaki taught us that endurance pays. He also taught us that you can actually fall once, twice, thrice, but as long as you want to rise up again, you'll rise up again and win the prize. He taught us that, and he became the president of this country after people had ruled him out politically. The people of Narok actually benefited from him through infrastructure like the Narok-Sekenani Road. And I think there are many things that he did for us. We got employment during his time, and he never segregated or served a particular community but served all Kenyans. May his soul rest in eternal peace. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Member for Kikuyu.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, and allow me to join other Kenyans in conveying my heartfelt condolences to the family of the late President, those of my family, and the people of Kikuyu. Honorable Speaker, the late Honorable Mwai Kibaki goes down in history as the greatest president since independence that this country has ever had. He is an economist par excellence, a Democrat par excellence, and he remains in the annals of our history as the greatest president that this country ever had. Honorable Speaker, the late president moved our economy from the doldrums to a renewed economy that was very robust. And Honorable Speaker, he did that, increasing our revenues from an average of 180 billion shillings to close to 1 trillion shillings without having to arrest a single business person in this country, without having to close down a single business in this country. Unlike today, Honorable Speaker, when our revenues are dwindling and we are closing people's businesses, we are shutting down businesses of the likes of Tabitha Karanja, Humphrey Karaoke, and other innocent Kenyans down in Down Road, Nyamakima, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, the late president was a Democrat par excellence, Honorable Speaker. He knew his boundaries between the state that he ran as president and private business. He knew and understood what state capture and conflict of interest was, and he never entertained it during his reign as president of our republic. And we will live to remember Mwai Kibaki, the greatest president of our times. Honorable Speaker, it is sad that today, as a nation rises to mourn the death of President Kibaki, we also mourn the death of the democratic space that he helped open after the dictatorship of the Moi regime. We mourn the death of our economy that he helped to uplift from the doldrums. And in a short 4 years of the handshake regime, the economy has been taken back to where President Mwai Kibaki had lifted it from. How sad it is, Mr. Speaker, that today, as we mourn the greatest president of all times in this country, Honorable Speaker, we also mourn the death of our economy. We mourn
the death of our then robust democracy, Honorable Speaker. And Honorable Speaker, we can only pray that those who tormented Mwai Kibaki, those who said that he's the hands off, ears off, everything off president, at his hour of death, we
Member for Emuru Dikir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wish also to rise to mourn a great icon, a great president who ever lived in this country. Speaker, even as we look outside there, where the great man is lying, we will remember him for many things, Mr. Speaker. One of the issues that we remember Kibaki, the late Kibaki, with is a change of economy in this country, Mr. Speaker. I think when Kibaki took over, Mr. Speaker, this country was in shambles economically. There were no roads, there were no good schools, there was nothing in this country, Mr. Speaker, which we could be proud of as a nation. Kibaki changed everything, Mr. Speaker. The GDP of this country was changed completely to levels that we can never imagine. Mr. Speaker, the borrowing in this country was stopped and reduced to a level that when he left this nation, Mr. Speaker, this country was not relying on borrowing, unlike what we have currently. Mr. Speaker, he even helped to change the constitution of this country. I remember even before the change of the constitution, he was among those people who fought for multi-party democracy in this country, Mr. Speaker, and we must give it to him. Speaker, even the constitution itself, remember the constitutions are usually changed at times of war, but Kibaki changed the constitution when the country was calm because he accepted that if there has to be a democracy in this country, then we as a nation must accept to change the law. Mr. Speaker, he did a lot in terms of infrastructure. I remember when we used to travel from Narok to Nairobi, Mr. Speaker, we'd go all the way to Nakuru, through Kericho, and then to Kino, and then to Nairobi. But after he took over, Mr. Speaker, he changed all the roads in this country so that each and every road was passable. Speaker, what Kibaki did in a few years, which I think it is only 5 years, he introduced even the free primary education, something which you can't imagine. The current government, which has taken this country for 10 years, has never even improved on the free primary education, Mr. Speaker, not even changing the free secondary education. Speaker, I wish to say, lastly, that Kibaki will be remembered for so many things. And what I'm saying is, even as we remember this great man, those of us who are left behind, suppose this country gave you an opportunity to serve as a president, what will you leave behind? Will you leave a united nation? Will you leave a country that is economically vibrant? Will you leave a country that will remember you for many good things? Or you will leave a country that will be in shambles? Speaker, that is a question that must live with us, even as we are closing the term of this 5-year term of members of parliament going for another election. Speaker, may
Rosanna.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on behalf of my family and my great county of Nairobi, we want to give our condolences to the family of the late His Excellency Mwai Kibaki. I want to quote Ellen G. White in her book Education. The greatest want of the world is the want of men who will not be bought or sold, men who in their innermost souls are true and honest, men who do not fear to call wrong by its right name, men whose conscience is as true to duty as the needle to the pole, men who will stand for the right though the heavens fall. End of quote. We are privileged as Kenyans to have had a president who had these virtues. Today, millions of youth who wholly benefited from free primary education, subsidized secondary fees, and university have increased productive, skilled labor to our workforce. The Honorable President, His Excellency Mwai Kibaki, made Kenyans believe the perception of governance changed during his tenure. Introduction of CDF, infrastructure. It's key to note that every time Kibaki partnered with Raila Kenya experienced tremendous growth, that is Vision 2030, the Thika Superhighway, the Constitution of 2010, devolution, election of more women to legislation. Mr. Speaker, as I stand here and we mourn this great leader, it was really painful to hear Ichung'wah Kimani talk about how he mourns the economy. At the end of the day, infrastructure was a very big dream of the late president. He believed in infrastructure, infrastructure, infrastructure. Some of the projects that the current presidency completed, right, were started in his tenure. And it is nice to note that all these highways that we enjoy, the continuity by His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta of the said projects have given Kenyans gateways to not only the region, but also the greater world. Let us celebrate that which is good, and let us thank the Almighty God for His mercies, as we know that the President was ailing, and now he has rested. My condolences to the entire family, and my gratitude to the entire Nairobi County for coming out in great numbers today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me the chance to pass my condolences on my own behalf, that of my family, and the great people of Kenya Central, to the family, friends of the late President Mourning Kibaki. Mr. Speaker, the late President Mourning Kibaki was in a cause of his own. He was a great man, a man who rose from being a humble shepherd in the slopes of Othaya to becoming the president of this great nation. He's a man who was involved in the improvement of the law in Kenya and also constitutional development in this country. He was involved in the enactment of the Independence Constitution, and more so the 2010 Constitution, which we all celebrate. He's a man who taught us humility through his deeds. One thing to remember, when he was demoted from being a vice president of this nation to a minister of health, instead of quitting, he went on to serve, and served so well. Also, one has to remember, he's a person who really also taught us resilience. He's a person who contested twice for the seat of the presidency, lost twice, but went on to win the presidency in 2002. It's someone who gave this country new hope when he won in the year 2002. Especially, he taught us that our children need to go to school, all of them, and through that introduced the free primary education. He's a man who taught this country to believe in itself in terms of economy. When he was the president, we saw banks hawking loans because the economy had improved so much through his policies. He's also a man who, through him, taught us that in his own class, he was an academic giant, especially considering that those years when he went to school. He excelled very well academically, and also went on to have masters in those early days. And I think it's true that this great man, we always remember him, especially also his way and gift of being counted together, even in the times of turmoil. Someone who never used to suffer fools, someone who never used to be harsh or even dictatorial throughout his management. In fact, he demystified the seat of the presidency in a way that we came to appreciate. You can criticize the president without being disrespectful. May his soul rest.
Member for Kajiado South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on my own behalf, on behalf of the people of Kajiado South and the people of the great county of Kajiado, I want to send my condolences to the family of the late President Mourning Kibaki, to the people of Othaya, to the people of this great country where he led for 10 good years, and say, Mr. Speaker, that first of all, I was the last Interior Minister of Kibaki's administration. Then it was called the Ministry of Internal Security and Professional Administration. And I just want to say that
Economically, Kibaki was a performer. Politically, he was a Democrat. Mr. Speaker, why do I say as a performer? You know, in my first term, 2003 to 2007, in my own constituency, Mr. Speaker, the Emali Loitoktok Road was tarmacked by, you know, the administration of the late President Mourning Kibaki. It was also in that time that the people of Loitoktok really remember the late president for giving us a district called Loitoktok District, where we used to come up to Nairobi and then go back to Kajiado to get our district services before, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the late President Mourning Kibaki can be remembered for so many good things. Actually, it's just good to say that so far, he is the best president we have actually seen as a country, Mr. Speaker. In fact, we keep saying that he came a little bit too late when the term limits for the president were already in our constitution, Mr. Speaker. Otherwise, we would be very far, Mr. Speaker, as a country, if we had gotten that democratic leadership and also leadership based on performance of Mheshimiwa Kibaki, Mr. Speaker. I also remember personally that he awarded me with 2 medals. One was the Moran of the Golden Heart. The other one, he awarded me the Elder of the Golden Heart, Mr. Speaker, as a cabinet minister. And I benefited so immensely with his wisdom when I used to consult him on matters of security, matters interests of this country, matters politically. And finally, I want to say what he used to tell us in cabinet, that cabinet ministers find time for 3 things. 1, find time for parliament. That is where you will articulate issues. Find time for your constituent and find time for your family. So he was a great family man. And I would like to say, may his soul rest in eternal peace. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Bumula.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. From the onset, on my behalf and on behalf of the great people of Bumula, I also wish to pass my condolences to the family of the late President Mourning Kibaki and the entire nation. Mr. Speaker, when we mourn such a great man, we pick some lessons that we need to follow as leaders of this country. One thing that I realized with Mr. President, the late President, that every time, because that time when he was serving as the President, some of us were in the civil service, but every time we had opportunity even to visit him in the evening, you realize that he's sitting with men who could guide him on how to run this country. Mr. Speaker, as a leader, you need good advisors. President Kibaki had very good advisors, and Ambassador Mudaura was always there to see the kind of people that would sit with the President until late. And today we are here to celebrate the great legacy that he has left in this country, a legacy that will be discussed with generations to come, because he was a kind of leader who decided to put the country first and not positions. Mr. Speaker, today you go to the villages, if you talk of the devolution that we can enjoy is actually the CDF that was championed by the late president. Some of the children, when we talked of raising this country from the wilderness, you realize that before Kibaki became the president, there are people who are learning under the tree. The best classroom, some of the places in this country were muddy walled classrooms, Mr. Speaker. But through CDF today, you go in the villages and you wonder whether these are primary schools or colleges built by the CDF funds. So, Mr. Speaker, this is one man who knew that the country was actually in need of his leadership, and he was not such an insecure leader. He was such a consultative man. He could always give people permission to serve in respective ministries. When you listen to some of those fellas who served with him, they will tell you that they will go to him to consult for advice and see how best to improve this country. Mr. Speaker, to talk less or even more about this man, you realize that the massive infrastructure today that we enjoy in this country, people talk of Thika Road, but you go to even to the villages, you realize that some areas which had no tarmac roads, Mr. Speaker, because of the policy of this great man, people had to enjoy the infrastructure that they had never benefited since independence. I concur with one leader who said here, I think it was the leader of the chief whip of the majority, who suggested that actually such a great man should be remembered. And the building standing behind you, Mr. Speaker, because of your effort also bringing it up, be named Mwai Kibaki Towers, so that this great man can be remembered by this house.
Asante sana Mheshimiwa Spika, nami pia kunipatia fursa hii ili nami niweze kutoa risala za rambirambi kutoka kwangu, jamii yangu na eneo bunge la Taveta kwa ujumla. Mheshimiwa Spika, rais wetu wa tatu wa Jamhuri ya Kenya, Mheshimiwa Mwai Kibaki, alikuwa tu si rais peke yake, bali alikuwa baba mpenda watu, mpenda maskini na kuhakikisha kuwa maskini wameinuliwa juu. Mheshimiwa Spika, nilipata fursa ya kufanya kazi naye kwa ukaribu, hata nilivyokuwa niko upinzani. Alikuwa kila mara alipenda kusikiza shida zetu za Taveta na kuweza kututatulia. Vile vile Mheshimiwa Spika, nilivyorudi awamu ya pili, tulifanya kazi na yeye akiwa rais wangu na vile vile akinipatia nafasi ya kuwa kwa baraza lake la mawaziri. Mheshimiwa Spika, baba huyu mpenda watu, baba wa taifa aliyekuwa si mwingi wa maneno, but alikuwa mwingi wa vitendo. Alikuwa anataka kusikia Wakenya wanapata faida gani, na ukitaka kumweleza chochote ni umwelezee kuwa Wakenya watafaidika vipi. Mheshimiwa Spika, Mheshimiwa Rais Kibaki alivyokuwa na upendo kwa watu wake, alikuja na njia ya kufanya kazi tofauti sana, ambayo nilikuwa nimetoa shukurani kwake. Nakumbuka baada ya vita vile ambavyo tulikuwa navyo na matatizo tuliyokuwa nayo baada ya uchaguzi wa 2007, alikuwa mtu ambaye alisimama kidete na kuhakikisha kuwa Wakenya
Order members. Honourable members, as you are aware, that the body of the late retired third President of the Republic of Kenya, His Excellency Mwai Kibaki, has been lying in state within Parliament buildings along the Speaker's walkway for the third and final day. In this regard, today's sitting has been determined to end at 4:45 p.m. to allow certain steps attendant to the departure of the body of the late retired President to take place before 6 p.m. Therefore, this is a sequence of what is going to follow. Debate in respect to the motion under order number 8, for which the mover has no right of reply, has just ended. Now, the Speaker's procession will leave the chamber as usual. Thereafter, honourable members will leave the chamber and converge at the main Parliament gate facing KICC and await the casket of the late retired third President as it exits Parliament buildings. The Chief Sergeant at Arms will guide members on their designated waiting place. The Speaker, the two leaders of the majority or minority, or the whips, and the Vice Chairperson of the Parliament Service Commission, the clerks at the table, and both the leadership of the Senate will assemble at the Members' Lounge to join the family of the late retired third President of the Republic of Kenya. The leadership will thereafter converge at the Speaker's walkway to form a procession to escort the casket, together with two representatives of the family and the Kenya Defence Forces team. On arrival of the casket at the late retired third President's at the main gate facing KICC, all members are requested to await the playing of the national anthem and the East African anthem before the casket is loaded onto the carriage to exit Parliament buildings. The parliamentary procession will symbolize the House paying its last respects and honoring the late retired third President for his service to the House. The House, honourable members, time being 49 minutes past 4, stands adjourned until Tuesday, 10th of May, 2022 at 2:30 p.m.